All right, here we go with chapter 9, the Scandinavian Defense. How are you doing, Jesse?
I'm doing well, Matt. I'm excited to look over the Scandinavian. My ex-lover used to play the Scandi for a long time, but eventually switched to the Kara once we released that course. So let's learn why it's bad, shall we?
And yeah,
um,
so Scandinavian is 1d5. Why is this so popular?
it's so popular because of our friend, uh, only in internet friend, John Bartholomew. He loves the D4, or sorry, the D5 Scandi, and he has a free course on Chessable that I studied a lot and really popularized the opening. And I see this a decent amount in my E4 games. Um, and I think he recommends a Queen D8 Scandi in that one, but he plays a bunch of other stuff. So we're going to look at Queen D8, Queen A5, and also Queen D6. I think those are the main moves we're going to look after these captures. So we're going to recommend capturing, Queen takes, and there's a few moves here, but Knight C3 is the most straightforward way to play for an advantage. So Knight C3, and first look at Knight A5.
Yeah, so Queen a5, this is the most popular retreat. Queen d8 has gained some popularity lately, and I think that's due to the fact that the engines are okay with that retreat. Originally, the Scandinavian players, I felt maybe thought that that was a waste of a move going right back to d8, and it was more active on a5. But let's start with this most popular move, Queen to a5. And here our recommendation is d4. We're going to gain space in the center. And oftentimes, the way that black wants to fight back in the center is to look to play c5 or e5. So keep both of those pawn breaks in mind. And this is going to be the first branching point in the main line. We will look at knight f6 and c6. So let's start with knight to f6.
And here we can just keep developing with Knight F3. One thing that you always need to keep in mind is this pin. We are going to allow it because it's not that strong of a move, and it's actually like you could almost consider it a bit of a mistake. It's not like losing or anything, but this isn't enough to be prevented. So after Knight F3, Bishop G4, and we're going to immediately put the question to the bishop. A lot of the times, black is just going to give the bishop pair. We'll look at that line next. But if not, then we'll show you how to gain some space if they do a typical bishop retreat. So bishop h5. What's our move here?
So here we're recommending pawn to g4, grabbing extra space on the king side. I'll throw some stats at you, Jesse. White is winning 61% in the club database to 33% for black. And one thing I really like about these lines with bishop g4, like you mentioned, they're very popular for the opponent. So at club level, a lot of players play bishop g4, but like Jesse mentioned, it actually tends to be a small mistake. So really, we can capitalize on some of the most common moves in the Scandinavian. All right, so after g4, bishop retreats to g6, and now our recommendation is knight to e5. And here we have a couple ideas at play. We're looking at knight to c4, which targets the queen, and that's also just a really nice square for the knight. And we're also looking at this idea of h4, h5, and this bishop is a target for us to attack. So we have the queen and the bishop both kind of hanging out there ready for us to attack them soon.
Yeah, so after knight e5, the most common move is knight bd7. Makes sense, kind of challenging our really strong knight. And we could take the bishop here, we could take the knight here, but we don't really get much from either of those trades. So it's probably a bit better to retain this bishop, and we can, or sorry, retain the knight. And we can do that with a nice tempo move, knight c4, hitting black's queen. Let's look at knight a6, which is, and we should mention that the queen here is a little bit out of squares. Like all these squares are taken. Can't go here, can't really move up. So I think this may be the only square for the queen. It's hard to calculate just kind of looking at it, but it's close. We are threatening knight d6 check, but unfortunately, right now, black can take with the queen. So what we're going to do is play bishop f4, and now we really are threatening this check.
So black is most likely here to play queen to e6 check. Like Jesse mentioned, there's not a lot of squares for the queen. This is actually the only move for black to stay alive. It's the only good move in the position. And we're going to meet this with knight back to e3. And now we're threatening pawn to d5. And if you look at the potential squares for that queen to move to, they're all going to be covered. Every single square. So pawn to d5 is going to trap the queen if black doesn't do something to react. Queenside castle is the most popular move. If queen to b6 is played here, trying to just run the queen around some more, attack b2, we can actually play bishop g2 and castle kingside, or we can even play the more active knight to b5, hitting the c pawn. So keep both of those moves in mind, but our main line is going to be queenside castle for black.
Yep, and at this point, the black queen is trapped. It is super hard to see, and you're probably not going to see it. So let's walk through the most forcing variation to show how we can actually win the queen here. It's like an impossible position to win the queen here. But let's start with d5. And this is all following the most common line. So this is the only move for the queen. How can we attack it? Knight c4. And you can see the queen is getting really squeezed here. There's almost nowhere to go. Knight c5. Continue attacking the queen. Knight b4. a3, and it's over.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Eval of +7. And yeah, the queen has to trade for one of the minor pieces now. 'Cause she pretty much has to take a knight or retreat somewhere that the bishop can capture her. So I think after d5, the strongest move for black is knight takes d5, giving up a knight instead of the queen. So black didn't have to lose the queen there, but I wanted to show in the main line how the queen gets trapped, and it's also the most popular line for black, trying to save their queen. Because no one wants to just sacrifice the knight right away. So let's go back now to the option where black could either play bishop to h5 or bishop takes f3. So we just looked at the retreat. Now let's look at bishop takes f3, giving us the bishop pair. We're going to play queen takes f3 back, eyeing this pawn on b7. If knight to c6 is played, we can pin it with bishop to b5. So let's look at pawn to c6 as the main line.
Yep, very solid move. This is kind of a pawn formation you're going to see a lot in the Scandinavian. It's called like the pincher pawn structure, or whatever. We have pawns on c6 and e6. So a nice move here is bishop d2, just kind of putting our eye on the queen. No immediate threats or anything, or I guess black is probably going to do something about this. So we don't have really anything that we're really threatening in this position, but it sets us up for some tactical play in the future. So after e6, again, going for this pincher kind of pawn structure. Now we can play knight e4, and we're looking for some trades here.
And now queen to d8 is the most popular move. We're going to recommend knight takes f6 check. So black either has to press the queen trade or they have to double their pawns. Most players are going to take with the queen, and we talk about queen trades all the time. In this case, queen takes f6 does give us an advantage. I think we can get an even larger advantage by sliding our queen across to b3. This hits the b7 pawn, and I think it's very difficult for black to defend b7 without creating some more weaknesses or slowing down their own development with a move like, let's say, queen back to e7, which kind of blocks in their f8 bishop. And there's 12 games in the club level database at this point. White has won 11 of them from this position. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, love to see that. So let's see how black is going to defend this pawn. Most common move is b6. And here we are going to castle queenside. I see that our f pawn is hanging. Do we care about that pawn?
Let's see what happens. Let's give black queen takes f2. We can play very actively here. Bishop c4, rook h to f1, and this actually increases our advantage from about +2 to +4, surprisingly. So we get a pretty big attack if black goes for that pawn. In our plan in
Love to
this
see that.
position, yeah, in our plan in this position with the +2 advantage, we have the bishop pair, more space, king safety. We would like to go queen e3, f4, g4, f5, h4 to start pushing all of these pawns up the board, attack the black king. and we do have that comfortable 2.1 point advantage. This should be a pretty good position for us.
It's almost looking like a Scotch game with this pawn storm coming.
It really, yeah, it's funny you say that. It looks a lot like our Scotch positions, doesn't it?